You know, there's a statistic I came across recently that really stopped me in my tracks. It said 97% of men over 50 don't realize when a woman is flirting with them. Think about that for a second. Almost every man past midlife is walking around completely unaware that someone might be interested, right under his nose. And honestly, it's not your fault. The world of connection, especially romantic connection, doesn't look the way it did when you were 25. Back then, the signals were obvious. Maybe she'd play with her hair, blush when you looked her way, or just come right out and say, "I like you." But today, things have shifted. Women your age and even younger women have learned to be more subtle. They don't want to put themselves on the line if they're not sure you're open to them. Instead of a big declaration or an obvious giggle, they do something most men completely overlook. They ask small, harmless questions. Questions like, "How old are you really?" or "Why aren't you married?" Maybe they'll ask, "Do you date younger women?" To you, it might just sound like polite conversation. But to her, it's a way of gently cracking the door open, seeing if you'll step through without making her feel exposed or foolish. And here's what happens when you don't recognize these signals. You walk away thinking it was just a pleasant chat. Maybe you even pat yourself on the back for being a friendly guy. Meanwhile, she's walking away feeling disappointed, telling herself, "Well, I guess he wasn't interested." I can't tell you how many men I've talked to, men in their 50s, 60s, even their 70s, who look back and realize they missed moments that could have changed everything. Moments that seemed ordinary at the time but were really quiet invitations to something more. I want you to pause here and ask yourself, when was the last time a woman asked you something that felt a little personal, but you brushed it off as nothing? Maybe you thought she was just being friendly. Maybe you thought you were too old for her to be interested. Here's the truth, you're not too old, you're not invisible. But you do need to learn to see what's right in front of you. That's why in this video, I'm going to walk you through 10 of the most subtle questions women use when they're curious, attracted, or hopeful about you. These aren't pickup lines. These are real moments, often disguised as casual curiosity, that can lead to genuine connection if you know how to recognize and respond to them. So stay with me, because once you understand these signals, you'll start to notice opportunities you never saw before. You'll realize that warmth, interest, and yes, even attraction are still very much alive in your life. All you have to do is learn to see the quiet door she's opening and be ready to step through. Let's get started. Let's talk about one of the most deceptively simple questions a woman can ask you. How old are you? Really, on the surface, it sounds innocent. Maybe even playful. But trust me, this question carries a lot more weight than you might realize. When a woman looks you in the eye and asks this, she's not playing a guessing game. She isn't trying to confirm whether you're 55 or 65. What she's really doing is feeling out something much deeper. Are you comfortable with who you've become? You see, as we get older, a lot of men start to carry their years like a burden. They apologize for them. They shrink a little, as if admitting their age means admitting they've lost something. And women can sense that energy immediately. I remember a story about a man named Rick. He was 64, silver hair, sharp dresser, had this charismatic air about him. One evening, he struck up a conversation with a woman at a jazz lounge. The chemistry was real good, eye contact, warm smiles. Then she leaned in and asked, "How old are you, really?" Rick thought he was being clever when he smiled and said, "Too old for you." He chuckled, thinking he'd pulled off a smooth line. But she didn't laugh the way he hoped. Instead, the spark in her eyes dimmed, almost like a curtain falling over the moment. Later that night, Rick told me, "I didn't just dodge her question, I dodged the chance to be seen." That's the thing, this question isn't about a number. It's about your relationship with that number. When you deflect or make a self-deprecating joke, you send the message that you're uncomfortable in your own skin. And that's the fastest way to kill attraction. So what can you do instead? When she asks how old you are, treat it like a door she's quietly opening. You don't need to impress her with youth. You don't need to pretend you're someone you're not. You just need to show her that you've made peace with where you are in life. You might say something simple but confident, like, old enough to know what matters, young enough to enjoy the ride. Or maybe with a playful grin, do you want my real age, or my attitude? Because here's what most men don't realize: women aren't looking for perfect youth. They're looking for presence. For a man who isn't apologizing for the years he's lived. For someone who can say, this is me, all of me, and I'm proud of it. So next time a woman asks you this question, don't see it as a trap or a test. See it as an invitation to stand tall in who you are. And let me ask you, if someone asked you right now, how old are you, really, would you shrink, or would you smile? That one choice can make all the difference in whether a quiet moment becomes a real connection. Let's talk about a question that catches a lot of men off guard. Maybe you've heard it yourself over dinner, or during a walk, when the conversation starts to feel warm. She looks at you with a curious smile and asks, so, why aren't you married? Now, I know on the surface, this sounds like an interrogation, like she's checking your credentials or fishing for gossip. But here's the truth most men never realize. She's not asking for your entire romantic history. She's not here to judge every chapter of your past. What she really wants to know is much simpler and more vulnerable. She wants to feel whether you're still open, whether you've made peace with everything behind you, and whether you still have room for something real right now. But here's where a lot of good men slip up. Some think they have to explain every detail, so they start recounting every heartbreak, every divorce, every missed chance. Others get defensive, brushing it off with a bitter laugh. Marriage. Tried that once, never again. I've seen it happen in real life. Gerald was 67, a thoughtful, kind man, widowed young. He met a woman at a community garden. They spent a few weeks chatting about everything: music, travel, even tomatoes. One afternoon, she looked up from the raised bed they were planting and softly asked, "How come a man like you isn't married?" And in that moment, just a heartbeat, he froze. He gave this stiff, factual answer about how things hadn't worked out, then changed the subject. A week later, she stopped coming to the garden. When he told me about it, he said, "I thought she was just being polite. I didn't realize she was wondering if we could have been something." That's what I want you to hear today. This question is not an audit, it's an invitation. When she asks, "Why aren't you married?" she's quietly wondering, is there space for me in your life? So how do you respond in a way that keeps the connection alive? It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be clever. All it takes is a little honesty mixed with a little hope. You could say something like, "Life kept me busy, but now I have space for something real." Or maybe, with a gentle smile, "I guess I just haven't met the right person." Until maybe now. See the difference? You're not telling her your entire resume. You're simply showing her that your heart is still open, that you haven't given up on connection. So if you've ever been asked this question, or you will be someday, pause before you rush to defend or explain. Take a breath, and answer like a man who still believes in what's possible. And if you found this video helpful, or you want more real conversations about dating and relationships, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. It helps us reach more men like you, men who still have a lot of life left to live. Stay tuned, because in the next segment, we're going to look at another question that sounds casual, but could be the moment everything changes. Let's explore a question that can feel tricky the first time you hear it. You're sitting across from a woman you genuinely enjoy, maybe at your favorite cafe or browsing the shelves of a cozy bookstore, and out of nowhere, she asks with a thoughtful look in her eye, "Do you date younger women?" It sounds so simple. But in reality, this question is never really about numbers. It's about something much more personal. I've heard a lot of men interpret this as either a compliment or a trap. Some feel flattered and immediately launch into stories about all the younger women they've dated, like they're trying to prove their desirability. Others, maybe worried about judgment, quickly shut the whole idea down and say, "Oh no, I'm way too old for that." Both responses miss the point, because when a woman asks you this, she isn't tallying up your dating history. She isn't testing your ego. What she's really asking is, could you ever see someone like me as more than just a friend? I want you to imagine what it takes for her to ask that. It's not a casual curiosity. It's vulnerability wrapped in a lighthearted question. She wants to gauge if the connection between you is real, if it matters to you more than her age. Let me share a story about Marcus. He was 59, the kind of man who always carried himself with quiet confidence. He met a woman in her mid-40s in a neighborhood bookstore. She asked him for a recommendation on memoirs. They talked about authors and shared a coffee afterward. Then, in that little pause between topics, she looked him straight in the eye and asked, "Do you usually date younger women?" Marcus could have bragged or brushed her off. Instead, he took a breath and said gently, "I don't date by age. I date by energy and connection." That one sentence shifted everything. She relaxed, smiled, not the polite kind of smile, but the one that says, "Okay, maybe this could be something." And that's the lesson here. When a woman asks about age differences, she isn't hoping you'll give her a statistic. She's hoping you'll give her permission to feel like she belongs in your story. Think about it this way. Are you really choosing a partner based on how old she is? Or are you choosing her based on how she makes you feel, how her presence lights up a room or brings out the best in you? The best way to answer this question is with a calm, open-hearted truth. Something like, "I care more about connection than birth certificates." Or even simpler, "What matters to me is how we feel together." It's honest, it's warm, and it shows you're not stuck in outdated ideas of what love should look like. So if you ever find yourself across from a woman brave enough to ask, "Do you date younger women?" remember, she's offering you an opening. How you respond could be the moment everything changes. Let's talk about a question that can feel deceptively casual, but carries so much weight underneath. You're sitting together, maybe over a late lunch or an evening coffee. The conversation has started to get a little more personal, a little warmer. She leans forward with that look in her eyes, the look that says she wants to know where she stands with you, and she asks, "What kind of woman do you usually go for?" Now, you might feel tempted to answer this the way many men do. Maybe you start listing physical traits, "I like blondes," "I prefer tall women," or whatever it might be. Some men default to vague cliches, "someone nice." But here's the truth. When she asks you this, she isn't shopping for compliments about herself. She isn't collecting data for some checklist. What she's really trying to figure out is whether she fits into the picture of your life. It's a vulnerable question if you think about it. It's her way of asking, "Would someone like me have a place in your heart?" I'll tell you a story about Elliot. He was 62, recently retired, and had spent most of his adult life so focused on work that he barely dated. One evening, he met a woman named Grace. They bonded over a shared love of jazz, and eventually, she asked him that very question, "What kind of woman do you usually go for?" Elliot could have rattled off some list about appearances or past relationships. But instead, he paused, looked at her, and said with quiet honesty, "I like someone who brings peace. Someone who makes life feel less heavy." You know what happened next? Grace smiled, and she stayed late that night to help him sort through old records. In that moment, she was silently hoping she could be the woman who brought that sense of peace into his life. That's how powerful this question can be. If you answer with a shallow checklist, you miss the chance to connect. But when you speak from the heart, you create space for real understanding. So when a woman asks you, "What kind of woman do you usually go for?" consider answering with something genuine. Maybe you could say, "I appreciate women who are thoughtful, curious, and can laugh even on a tough day." Or even, "I admire someone who cares deeply about the people around her." These answers do more than describe an ideal partner. They invite her to imagine herself in that role, to see if she shares those qualities and values. So the next time you hear this question, pause, take a breath, and answer in a way that honors her courage to ask and your own desire for a meaningful connection. Because the right words, spoken with sincerity, can be the start of something real. Let's talk about a question that might sound playful on the surface but actually tells you a lot about where you stand with someone. Picture this. You're sitting across from her, maybe in a cozy little cafe or just sharing a park bench in the afternoon sun. You've been talking about everything from your favorite movies to why you still think vinyl records sound better than streaming. There's that easy warmth between you, like you've known each other longer than you really have. Then she smiles, tilts her head, and says with a spark in her eye, "Are you always this charming?" Now, this is where a lot of men trip over themselves without realizing it. Some will rush to dismiss it, "Oh, only today," or "I'm not really that charming," as if batting away her words will somehow keep things humble. But here's the thing. When a woman asks you this question, she's doing two things at once. She's giving you a compliment, telling you she feels good in your presence, and she's gently testing you to see if you can stay in the moment. Will you own who you are? Or will you deflect and shrink back? I'll share a story. Alan, a 60-year-old recently divorced gentleman, once told me about a date where he nearly ruined the vibe by brushing off this question. The woman he was seeing looked genuinely intrigued by him, and when she asked, "Are you always this charming?" he laughed and muttered, "Only when I've had 2 coffees." She smiled politely, but he could feel the spark fade. The next time he heard the same question from a different woman, he decided to try something else. He looked her in the eye and said with calm sincerity, "Only when I'm with someone who makes me feel like myself." She didn't look away after that. In fact, she leaned closer, curious and open. That's what makes this moment special. It's a chance to step fully into your confidence without arrogance. It's about meeting her presence with your own. If you're wondering how you might answer this question, think about responses that honor the moment instead of deflecting it. You could say, "I try to save it for moments that truly matter." Or even, "Maybe it's just that this feels like exactly where I'm meant to be." These kinds of replies do something powerful. They validate her experience of you without cheapening it or brushing it away. So the next time a woman asks if you're always this charming, take it as a sign that she sees something in you she likes and that she hopes you'll own it. Because when you do, you show her that you're not only present but also capable of real connection. And in the end, that's what creates lasting chemistry. Two people brave enough to just be themselves, right there in that moment together. Have you ever been sitting across from someone who looks you right in the eye and asks, "So, why don't you have a girlfriend?" At first, it can feel like a bit of a trap, like there must be something wrong with you if you're single. Some guys get defensive right away. Others crack a joke about enjoying their freedom or say something cynical like, "Relationships are too much trouble at this point." But let's be honest. When a woman asks you this question, she's not trying to corner you. She's actually offering you a little window chance to share something real about where you are in life. In her mind, the question is simple. Is your heart still open? Is there room for me? I remember a man named William who told me this story. He was 65, and after a long marriage that ended in divorce, he hadn't dated for several years. One afternoon, he was talking to a woman he'd met through a friend. The conversation was easy, full of laughter and little stories about their families. Then she leaned in and asked softly, "Why don't you have a girlfriend?" For a moment, he felt the old urge to deflect, to say something like, "I'm just enjoying being alone." But he took a breath instead and decided to be honest. He said, "I've been learning how to be a better man. I wanted to understand who I am before I tried to love someone again. And now, I think I'm ready for a better kind of love." She never looked away after that. In fact, she smiled and nodded like she'd been hoping he'd say exactly that. Because here's the truth. People admire someone who is willing to do the work on themselves. It shows maturity, self-awareness, and respect for whoever might come into your life next. So if you're ever faced with this question, resist the temptation to brush it off or sound jaded. Don't hide behind casual jokes about freedom or how relationships are overrated. That only signals that you're closed off or maybe a little bitter. Instead, you could say something simple, honest, and inviting. "I've been waiting for something unexpected." Or even, "I wanted to leave space in my life for the right person instead of the next person." These kinds of answers don't just make you sound interesting. They show that you value connection enough to be patient and that you're still hopeful about what could happen. And at the end of the day, hope is magnetic. It draws people to you in a way no rehearsed line ever could. So next time someone asks, "Why don't you have a girlfriend?" take a breath and see it for what it really is, an open door. Your answer might be the moment when everything quietly shifts towards something real. Let's talk about one of the most tender questions a woman can ever ask you. Imagine you're sitting across from her, maybe after dinner or during a walk, and she looks at you just a little longer than usual. Her voice softens, and she says, "Would you ever date someone like me?" At first, you might not realize the weight of what she's saying. But trust me, this isn't a casual question. This is almost a confession. It's courage wrapped in vulnerability. She's really asking, "Am I still desirable? Do you see me?" You'd be surprised how many men get this moment completely wrong. Some dodge it by joking, "Well, I haven't thought about it." Others offer a lukewarm shrug, trying not to appear too eager. But in her heart, she's hoping you'll meet her vulnerability with genuine warmth. I remember a story from a man named Charlie. He was in his early 60s, divorced, and had spent most of his life feeling like love was something that just happened to other people. Then he met a woman named Leela, who was vibrant and kind, but also carried her own scars. One evening, they were sitting on a park bench, talking about everything: loss, hope, starting over. And out of nowhere, she looked into his eyes and asked, "Would you ever date someone like me?" Charlie could have dodged it. He could have laughed or said something vague. Instead, he paused, took a breath, and said, "I think I'd be a fool not to." In that moment, she reached for his hand. Because that's the power of honesty. It doesn't just answer the question, it heals something unspoken. When you hear this question, don't let your own fear or uncertainty make you pull away. Don't diminish her courage by pretending you didn't hear it. Instead, consider how much vulnerability it took for her to ask. Consider how many times she's wondered if her age, her story, or her imperfections might keep someone from wanting her. You have a chance in that moment to say something that feels like a warm light turning on inside both of you. A response as simple as, "I'd be lucky if I could," tells her that you see her fully and you still say yes. That's not just charming, it's profoundly reassuring. If you've ever been in her place, you know how much it means to hear someone say, "You are worth choosing." So next time you're asked, "Would you ever date someone like me?" remember, it's a gift. Answer with your whole heart. And if you'd like more insights on how to build genuine connections and recognize these hidden invitations in conversation, I'd love for you to subscribe to the channel. We're building a community here for people who believe it's never too late to love bravely. There's something quietly beautiful about this question. Do you think we have a lot in common? It sounds simple, almost casual, like something you'd ask in passing. But if you listen closely, there's so much more beneath it. She's not just asking about hobbies or whether you both like the same music. She's really wondering, do you feel what I feel? Is there something real happening between us? This question often shows up when a woman feels a spark but isn't sure if you sense it too. She's reaching out with a little hope and a lot of courage, trying to find out if you see the same possibilities she does. Many men underestimate how important this moment is. They brush it off with a vague reply. "Yeah, sure," or turn it into a joke. "Well, we're both here, aren't we?" But doing that can make her feel like she's the only one invested. I once spoke with a man named Robert. He was 68, widowed, and for years he believed connection was something that either happened instantly or not at all. Then he met Diane. They were introduced by a mutual friend and started meeting for coffee. Over time, Diane started to feel the bond growing, shared stories about family, the same sense of humor, even similar memories of past heartaches. One afternoon, she looked up from her cup and asked, "Do you think we have a lot in common?" Robert paused. For a moment, he thought about deflecting. He didn't want to come on too strong. But then he remembered how long it had been since someone asked him a question that sincere. He looked her in the eye and said, "I feel like we have more in common than I ever expected." Diane smiled in a way that told him she'd been hoping to hear exactly that. Because here's the truth. When someone asks if you feel a connection, it's a moment of invitation. It's their way of saying, "I'm here, are you?" If you're willing to meet that vulnerability with your own honesty, you create a space where something real can grow. So when you hear this question, don't rush to answer with a throwaway comment. Take a breath. Reflect on what you've shared so far, the laughter, the quiet moments, the things that feel easy between you. A simple, heartfelt response, "I feel like we have more in common than I expected," or "I'm surprised by how natural this feels," can be exactly what she needs to feel safe opening her heart even further. If you've ever wondered when connection really begins, it's often in small moments like this. When do people dare to wonder out loud whether their lives might fit together? So next time someone asks you if you feel that spark too, remember, it's not just a question. It's an open door. When a woman looks you in the eye and asks, "What do you usually do on weekends?" it might sound like she's just curious about your hobbies. But the real question she's asking is much more personal. Is there space in your life for someone like me? It's easy to overlook this moment. Maybe you're used to answering automatically, "Oh, nothing much. Just the usual." But if you stop and think, you'll realize she's offering you an opening. She wants to picture herself alongside you. She's wondering whether your life has room for company, adventure, or simply the kind of quiet time that feels like home. Think about it. Weekends are often when we let our guard down. That's when we do what we love most. Maybe you tend your garden, watch old westerns, or meet friends for breakfast at that same diner you've been going to for 20 years. Or maybe weekends are when you feel a little lonely when the house is too quiet and you find yourself wishing there was someone to share the morning coffee with. I remember talking to a gentleman named Frank. He was 72, retired, and he'd built a comfortable routine of Saturday crossword puzzles and Sunday walks. But deep down, he missed the feeling of having someone to share those small moments. One afternoon, he met a woman named Carla at the library. They got to talking, and after a while, she asked him, "So, what do you usually do on weekends?" Frank paused. He could have brushed it off with a simple answer. But instead, he took a breath and said, "I like to walk around the neighborhood and discover new little cafes. Sometimes I visit the farmer's market. I'd love to hear your favorite spots too." You know what happened? Carla smiled, and right then, she started to imagine what it would feel like to join him. That's the power of this question. It's not about listing activities to impress someone. It's about showing that your life still has open spaces, places where another person could fit in. So the next time a woman asks you this, don't rush to minimize or hide your routine. Instead, share it honestly and invite her into the picture. You could say something like, "I enjoy exploring new cafes and walking through the park. Do you have any recommendations?" Or, "I usually keep it simple, good coffee, good conversation. Maybe you'd like to join me sometime." That one sentence can turn a casual chat into the start of something real. Because in the end, we're all looking for the same thing, a life that feels fuller because someone else is in it. And sometimes, it starts with a simple question about your weekend. Every once in a while, you'll meet someone who dares to ask a question that isn't practical or polite, it's something deeper. Do you believe in fate? It's one of those questions that doesn't belong to logic. It belongs to the heart. When a woman asks this, she isn't just making small talk. She's giving you an opening to step into something bigger, a moment that feels a little magical, like life is nudging you in the same direction. Maybe you've had times when you bumped into someone at exactly the right moment when you needed a kind word or a new beginning. Or maybe you felt an unexplained pull towards someone you just met, like you were meant to cross paths. That's what she's really wondering. Do you think we're sitting here together for a reason? This is not the time to be cynical. It's not the moment to shrug and say, "I don't know, I guess things just happen," because when you deflect, you miss a chance to build something real and memorable. I once knew a man named Arthur. He was 69 and had spent most of his life believing everything was pure coincidence. But after his wife passed away, he found himself rethinking what he believed. One evening at a community dinner, he met a woman named Leela. They talked for hours, the kind of conversation that feels effortless and rare. Eventually, she asked him softly, "Arthur, do you believe in fate?" He almost gave his usual answer, "Not really." But he paused, looked into her eyes, and said, "I think some people show up exactly when they're meant to." Leela reached across the table and touched his hand. It was the beginning of something he never expected. A second chance at love, sparked by a simple question about destiny. When someone asks you if you believe in fate, they're really asking if you can meet them in a place beyond logic, if you're willing to believe in something a little bigger than yourself. So how could you respond in a way that opens that door? Try saying, "I believe some people cross our paths at the perfect moment." Or, "I think there's a reason we're here talking right now." When you share that openness, you create space for something beautiful to unfold. Because sometimes, the best things in life don't arrive on a schedule. They come when you least expect it, when you're ready, whether you know it or not. So if she asks you about fate, take a breath, smile, and consider the possibility that you're exactly where you're supposed to be. Sometimes the most powerful messages aren't spoken out loud. They're woven into the quiet moments, into a glance, a touch, or the space between you. Have you ever noticed when someone holds your gaze just a little longer than seems casual? It's not an accident, it's an invitation. Or maybe you felt the lightest brush of a hand on your arm. It can feel so subtle you almost wonder if you imagined it. But let me assure you, you didn't. These are the silent signals women use when they want you to know they're comfortable, and maybe even interested. Body language is a language all its own. And the truth is, many men, especially those who haven't dated in a while, completely miss these cues. Let me share the story of Daniel. He was 62 when he started seeing someone new after years on his own. Every time they met for coffee, she would lean in just a little closer than necessary. Her fingers would lightly tap his forearm when she laughed. She'd mirror the way he rested his hands on the table, like an unspoken dance. Daniel thought she was simply being friendly. He didn't realize that each of those little gestures was her way of saying, "I feel safe with you. I'm open to seeing where this could go." Then, one day, she stopped reaching out. She stopped meeting his eyes across the table. And when she said goodbye, she didn't linger. That's when Daniel finally felt the emptiness that comes when those subtle signals disappear. It was only then he understood how much connection had been alive in those small touches. You see, body language is like a quiet invitation. But here's something important to remember. Those invitations don't stay open forever. If you never look back into her eyes, if you never lean in when she does, if you never let yourself respond to her warmth, eventually, she decides you're not interested, even if you were deep down. So I want to encourage you, pay attention to the little things. Next time you're with someone, notice if she mirrors your gestures. Does she angle her body toward you, even in a crowded room? Does her hand find a reason to touch yours? These small moments speak volumes. And if you can be present enough to notice, you'll discover that connection isn't always about the perfect words, it's about showing her you see her. Because sometimes, the most meaningful signals are the ones no one else would ever spot. When you learn to recognize them, you'll never again wonder if you missed your chance. You'll know when she's inviting you closer, and you'll be ready to step into that space with openness and confidence. If you take only one thing from this video, let it be this. After 50, the way attraction shows up is softer, quieter. It's rarely loud or obvious. The giggles and bold declarations of youth often give way to something more subtle and, in many ways, even more meaningful. You don't need fancy pickup lines or some polished performance. You don't need to pretend you're someone you're not. In fact, that's the quickest way to create distance. What women appreciate most, especially at this stage of life, is presence. Being right there in the moment with them. Listening without rushing to fix or impress. Speaking honestly without worrying about sounding perfect. You might be surprised how powerful it feels simply to stay warm and steady when someone opens up to you. When she asks a question that feels tender, like "Why don't you have a girlfriend?" Or "Do you believe in fate?" Those are invitations, not tests. So here's my advice, from years of seeing countless couples find real connection later in life: stay calm. Stay warm. Don't deflect or brush things off with jokes that hide your true feelings. If you feel unsure, remember every person you meet is probably feeling a little vulnerable, too. You don't have to script the moment or figure out exactly what to say ahead of time. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to pause, take a breath, and respond from the heart. And if you ever catch yourself thinking you need to become some brand new version of yourself to be attractive, please hear this: you don't. You already have everything you need to create a meaningful bond. Being the man you already are, the one who has lived, who has learned, who is willing to be open again, that's what makes you magnetic. If you've watched this far, chances are you care about building something real. Maybe you've been wondering whether it's too late to start again, or whether anyone is out there looking for the same connection you crave. I promise you, it's not too late. You have so much love, curiosity, and adventure ahead. There are people who would be so lucky to share this next chapter with you. So take what you've learned today, and let it remind you. You don't have to overthink it. All you need is the courage to stay present, the kindness to really listen, and the honesty to show up exactly as you are. If this video spoke to you, if it made you feel hopeful or a little braver, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Here, we have many more real conversations waiting, because your story isn't over. In fact, it might just be getting started.